19 days. We are 19 days away from the Kansas City Chiefs kicking off the preseason against the Jacksonville Jaguars, but we are here today to talk about notes from day 2 of training camp. I have too many papers on my desk. I apologize about that. And we are breaking things down a little bit differently. I will be bringing you tweets from individuals, not from a timeline. So there are a few things that are going to be a little bit off, maybe thematically or chronologically, but we're starting with Pete/Sweeney, and we're starting with an apology. I was wrong. I'm sorry. I was of the opinion that Trey Dean was a dark horse, not just to make the roster, but to be an impact player on the defense. I have seen too many things from Trey Dean. I have heard too many quotes about Trey Dean. I had done research about Trey Dean. Trey Dean was cut. Trey Dean was cut and replaced with Tyree Gillespie. Now, look, I am a Tyree Gillespie fan. If there is one, I am a Mizzou guy. I didn't go to Mizzou, but a Mizzou fan, I guess I should say. And Tyree Gillespie is a guy. Tyree Gillespie's a guy. I think that Tyree Gillespie is exactly what it is that we're looking at here, a fringe roster type of talent. There's nothing wrong with that. Probably a special teamer if he ends up on the roster. But here's the interesting thing to me about this. In my opinion, so here's how I should start this. This almost must have been something that was, look, maybe his 40-yard dash was starting to show on the field. He had a very bad 40-yard dash. Maybe there was, I haven't heard anything off the field. That's not what I'm suggesting, but maybe there is some type of behavioral thing, like just not jiving with the team or something. I really have thought that Trey Dean is an NFL talent, but moving beyond the Trey Dean aspect of this move, the interesting thing to be said here is, while I was wrong about Trey Dean, very wrong, very, very wrong, one of the things that seemed apparent, and we've talked about on this channel for a while now, is that Brett Veach was going to have an itchy trigger finger, and he's already done it twice. This training camp already, there was a tight end that was apparently injured and was replaced by Isaiah Gathings. The name is eluding me at the moment. Maybe I could scroll up and find it, but didn't wait around for that tight end to say, hey, Garrett Prince. Garrett Prince was not extended the nicety, if you will, of having his roster spot saved. Moved on. Brett Veach moved on. Day 2, safety, moved on. Here's one of the interesting things about that. You lost a tight end, you signed a tight end. You cut a safety, you signed a safety. It's difficult to really understand exactly what's going on with these, because you are looking at two positions where the Kansas City Chiefs likely have all of the talent that will see the defensive and offensive side of the field figured out ahead of that player. Travis Kelce, obviously, Jared Wiley, and Noah Gray probably going to get 99% of the tight end snaps for the Kansas City Chiefs. There are multiple safeties ahead of who was Trey Dean and is now Tyree Gillespie. So you almost have to wonder, what is the upside to these moves? Not saying, and I'm obviously not questioning Brett Veach. All I'm saying is I don't see it, right? So the obvious conclusion is I'm wrong, but where is that underlying ethos to these moves? Where's the gist of this going? I don't know yet. I really don't. cutting the fourth, fifth tight end to sign the fourth, fifth tight end, cutting the fifth, sixth safety to sign the fifth, sixth safety. They are interesting moves. I almost have to wonder if at this point, look, Garrett Prince, probably not going to make the roster. Trey Dean, maybe, probably not going to make the roster. If you see Trey Dean loafing at practice, well, you cut him. Why don't you? Why wouldn't you? There needs to be an upbeat practice here. So this is ruling with an iron fist type of stuff, but maybe that's what's at play here. Then we get from Pete, interesting, Kingsley Suamataia in for Wanya Morris at left tackle after 3 plays of 11s, but also Keough Godric in for Jawan Taylor at right tackle. And so long as I clipped that tweet too, there's another tweet later talking about this in a little bit more depth because we get a couple other players involved when you're talking about the rotations that are interesting to see put up here. But what is to be made of this? The fact that Kingsley Suamataia rotated in for Wanya Morris at left tackle after 3 plays is interesting. But how many plays was Kingsley Suamataia in? I did not get that information anywhere on Twitter from any of these resources. If Wanya Morris was in for 3 and then Kingsley Suamataia was in for 3, that is less interesting, but still interesting. If the 11-on-11 portion of practice was 15 plays and Wanya Morris got 3 of them, a little bit more of an interesting nugget. The inclusion of Keough Godric at the right tackle spot for Jawan Taylor, I think, so this is how it started last season for Najee Johnson. If you remember, if you think back and you remember last year's training camp, Najee Johnson started getting first team reps 1 or 2 at a time. By the time of his injury, it was looking like Najee Johnson was not just going to make the team, but was going to be heavy in the cornerback rotation for the Kansas City Chiefs. But this is exactly the way it started last season. Do I believe that Keough Godric is going to be challenging Jawan Taylor for the right tackle spot? I don't, but I haven't seen Keough Godric play really. Maybe there's something there I don't know about. The one thing I remember about any of the tape that I saw of him was he does look very fluid, right? That is an interesting tidbit for an offensive lineman. To look very fluid out there on the field is something that can be important. Kingsley Suamataia and Wanya Morris, however, at this point, it looks like we do not have any. Wanya Morris is consistently being the first one run out there. The reps do not necessarily look like they are cemented in as first-team reps. It would not surprise or shock me if in the next couple of days, all of a sudden, Kingsley is run out there first. And here's what that does. It builds Kingsley Suamataia's confidence. So even if you don't believe that Kingsley's going, even if you were the coaching staff here and you don't believe that Kingsley is the best left tackle, you go ahead and you run him out there as the first team someday. Why? Well, it builds Kingsley's confidence and it tells Wanya Morris, hey, you might be slipping off a little bit, buddy. So you have the positive encouragement for Kingsley. You have Wanya Morris thinking, oh, I want to be the starting left tackle. What have I been doing wrong? Let me look inward. Let me work harder to see if I can. Now, this is all manipulative. This is all, Freudian type stuff, sure, but that's what coaching is. And then All of a sudden, when Wanya Morris finds himself back out there on day 5 as the starting left tackle, Kingsley Somata'ia has to ask himself the same questions. And it's also something that builds toughness with these players, right? You see who is resilient and wants those starting spots. Another note from, I believe this is the penultimate note from Pete. With cornerback Kelvin Joseph out of camp and Jalen Watson still working back, cornerback Echo Boydo getting second string reps opposite Najee Johnson. Trent McDuffie and Joshua Williams remain the top outside cornerbacks. Now, this phrase, with Kelvin Joseph out of camp, I have heard Kelvin Joseph had an excused absence. Multiple times I have seen the phrase Kelvin Joseph out of camp. That is a little bit more worrisome a phrase than if the guy had a wedding he had to go to or something of the sort that he had, of which he had alerted the coaching staff months prior, right? So that is a weird thing, but Kelvin Joseph, we talked about yesterday. Jalen Watson, I've talked about on this channel since he was drafted. I'm upset I had to delete those videos because my work on Jalen Watson was true. Ended up being good stuff. But Echo Boydo and Najee Johnson taking the second team reps, which if you do the math, you're looking at third team reps, right? Because you have 2 players ahead that are gone, Kelvin Joseph and Jalen Watson. So Echo Boydo and Najee Johnson looking like those third string cornerbacks. Trent McDuffie and Joshua Williams obviously being the top 2. How do we feel about that? Echo Boydo ended up getting on the field for the Kansas City Chiefs a little bit late last season. I believe it was only that final week of the season that he actually got playing time, but he did get playing time. Najee Johnson obviously was hurt all last season. There is a tweet later on where we will get back to this a little bit, but I do think that it is worth noting on this tweet that at least in the mind of the media, Kelvin Joseph and Jalen Watson are still the number 2 pair of corners for the Kansas City Chiefs behind Trent McDuffie and Joshua Williams. I think that is the case. Again, Kelvin Joseph is an absolute monster physically. Just a monster out there for what the measurables are. But it's going to be interesting to see with this group of corners what ends up happening outside of Trent McDuffie. Trent McDuffie is obviously the number 1 cornerback, but if you have 2 guys that are starter level corners, you will see probably a whole lot of slot work for Trent McDuffie. Pete carries on. Chiefs defensive coordinator describes the outside cornerback competition opposite Trent McDuffie as wide open. Spags confirmed the candidates as Joshua Williams, Jalen Watson, Najee Johnson. Williams has been getting the work the first 2 days with Watson out. This is phenomenal, and I'm going to... Trent McDuffie, Joshua Williams, Jalen Watson, and Najee Johnson. What do those names have in common besides being Kansas City Chiefs, besides playing cornerback? That's right. They all became Kansas City Chiefs in the same NFL draft. So if we are having this type of output at the cornerback position for the Kansas City Chiefs, maybe we will see that same level of success with the offensive line that the offensive lineman, that the Kansas City Chiefs ended up drafting this past season. But the number 2 cornerback spot opposite Trent McDuffie being wide open, but he did designate Joshua Williams, Jalen Watson, and Najee Johnson as the likely candidates here, limiting the field. Nick Ball, Miles Battle, Chamari Connor, all of these names, Kelvin Joseph, not mentioned there. This tells you that those are the top 4 names. Now you've got a first rounder, a 7th rounder, 2 7th rounders, and Joshua Williams was the 4th or 5th. I can't remember off the top of my head right now, but incredible haul for a single draft by Brett Veach. Moving on here, keep that in mind though. Keep that battle in mind there. The Chiefs say why. So Xavier Worthy and Kelvin Joseph were absent. Xavier Worthy with an illness. Kelvin Joseph, again, was excused. I wanted to put this out there because the optics on Xavier Worthy missing all of minicamp, missing the rookie minicamp with injuries, stepping in day 1 of training camp, and then being absent day 2 of training camp. Not great optics. Not great optics. We went through Sammy Watson, right? We went through all of these players that have been oft injured, constantly injured, perma injured. Not a great look. But I wanted to put it out there that apparently he is sick, not injured. From Sam McDowell, Drew Tranquill is really flying around during 7-on-7 drills. The reason I wanted to include this observation from training camp is simply this. We talked a lot on this channel about Willie Gay and how Willie Gay represented a very high ceiling for the linebacker position here in Kansas City. And I think that was true. Obviously, that was true. Willie Gay made some of the most athletic and impressive plays that we have seen from linebackers for a very long time in Kansas City. That does not mean that he was the best football player the Kansas City Chiefs had at the outside linebacker position. There is a difference between being an athlete and being a football player. Sometimes people are such good football players it ends up compensating for athleticism. Nick Bolton. Sometimes players are such good athletes that it ends up compensating for the football stuff. A little bit, that was Willie Gay, especially early in his career. Drew Tranquill is a good athlete. Drew Tranquill, a great football player. Willie Gay ended up being a great athlete who made himself into a good football player. I think where that might translate, Nick Bolton, great football player. Drew Tranquill, great football player. Leo Chanel, we haven't seen it a lot yet. Great football player. Leo Chanel often also happens to be an absolutely phenomenal athlete, a just mind-boggling type of athlete for the body that in which he finds himself. But great football players over great athletes at the linebacker position might be a winning formula. These are the guys in the middle of everything. So if there is a place to have great football players over great athletes, it might be linebacker and defensive tackle. We see, so Chris Jones is obviously a freak, a great athlete, a great football player. Mike Pennell, not a phenomenal athlete, but he has crafted himself into being a great football player, a really good football player. Above good, maybe below great, right? Great in the playoffs last year, but that wasn't consistent. Otherwise, he would have found himself on the field more, right? I don't think that's a controversial statement. So having the great football players right there in the middle of the defense is something that I think is going to contribute meaningfully to the underrated nature of this football team and the defensive unit itself. It's one of the reasons I think the defense went so underrated through most of last year. It ended up being solid. Maybe not the biggest and flashiest, maybe not the most spring-loaded, but the defense was solid on a rep-by-rep, play-by-play, down-by-down basis from week to week. Linebacker consistency and great football play at the linebacker position helps that out. From Matt Derrick, lots of rotation on the tackles today. We talked a little bit about this earlier. Wanya Morris again first up on the left side with Kingsley Suamataia splitting reps. Chu Godric has also been getting looks behind Jawaan Taylor on the right side. Second team line with left tackle Ethan Driscoll and right tackle Lucas Niang. I'll start with Lucas Niang. It's almost easy to forget about Lucas Niang, isn't it? You have Wanya Morris and Kingsley Suamataia, who are obviously starter-level talents in the NFL. You have Jawaan Taylor brought in to be the starter at the right side. Apparently, Chu Godric has made a name for himself. I think last year was very quiet for him from start to finish on the practice squad. But then you have Lucas Niang buried behind all of them. Lucas Niang has starting reps in the NFL. He has numerous reps below his belt. It is going to be interesting to see what the Kansas City Chiefs decide to do with Lucas Niang. I made a video about offensive trade bait positions. Lucas Niang might found himself on that list for me. I think it is realistic that he finds himself out there in real life. And again, like I said in that video, you're not going to find yourself getting a third-round pick for Lucas Niang. I don't mean that. You have to open up roster spots at the end of this thing anyway. If you end up trading him for a seventh or Lucas Niang and your seventh to swap up with someone else's seventh, you take it, right? The real interesting name to find on that list is left tackle Ethan Driscoll getting second team reps. Now, again, this looks like third team reps to me. On the left-hand side, you have Wanya Morris and Kingsley Suamataia. Then you have Ethan Driscoll. That looks a lot like a third option to me. But I'm not going to nitpick there. Getting Ethan Driscoll on the field in day 2 of training camp for reps with the second team is a very promising sign. I have not heard word one about Mike Caliendo. And we don't get a whole lot of talk about offensive linemen and especially interior offensive linemen during training camp, especially during the early days of training camp. But I haven't heard word one about Mike Caliendo. All of a sudden, and Mike Caliendo got reps last season. Mike Caliendo played a year on the practice squad and then was active last year and got onto the field. If Ethan Driscoll finds himself on the active roster this year, and I know they play different positions, but it puts him a year ahead of the training curve of Mike Caliendo. Finding offensive linemen for free. Finding offensive linemen as UDFA, which means for free, is absolutely monumental. Finding anybody for free in the NFL, UDFA level, is absolutely monumental. Finding a left tackle, that would be insane value for the Kansas City Chiefs, even if, he doesn't have to be the number 1, number 2 guy. A lot of teams, if you look at things structurally, they have buried on their depth chart a guy who's making disproportionate money for being the third string left or right tackle, maybe the swing tackle, because he's a legacy player. He's someone that they had drafted and then had to draft over and sign over, etc. He's a guy like Jawaan Taylor might find himself, who was signed for big bucks and ended up being pushed down the roster. Or he's a guy who was brought in for insurance. So having a left tackle, maybe your third left tackle, that is UDFA, the level of money there is very insubstantial as far as left tackle pay is concerned. The last note from him here, Joshua Williams picks off Patrick Mahomes' pass intended for Sky Moore. Williams eventually laterals to Chris Jones. Interesting decision, but it picked up a few yards more. It's the first time you see Sky Moore's name in connection with anything, and it is an interception. Matt McMullen, the one note I have here from him, Trent McDuffie with a great PBU on a pass deep down the field during 11-on-11, caught up to the throw and broke it up right at the catch point. This tweet does not make it obvious whether or not Trent McDuffie was playing the outside cornerback position or a slot corner position. I'm going to just assume for the sake of argument that it was an outside cornerback position. One of the knocks on Trent McDuffie coming out of college was that his arms were too short. This was going to keep him from being a boundary corner, and apparently not. Again, I do not have the name of the quarterback here. But if you're talking about 11-on-11, I think that the odds are disproportionately high that the quarterback in question was Patrick Mahomes. Trent McDuffie racing down the sidelines to break up a pass from Patrick Mahomes. And another thing you have to ask, on who? Is this Hollywood Brown he's covering? Hollywood Brown of elite speed? Is this McCole Hardman of elite speed? Is this Justin Watson, who's a bigger guy than Trent McDuffie? Right, there's all these questions we don't really have from any of the iterations of this tweet from different guys who are covering camp at camp. But this says to me that Trent McDuffie finds himself in mid-season form already. These types of timing plays, very rough early in camp, very rough early in the season. Oftentimes, this becomes a penalty. It's just mistimed. It becomes pass interference because you got there just a hair too early, just a hair too late. And here we have an example of Trent McDuffie getting this pass breakup apparently right on the money. That is all I have for this episode. If you like or appreciate what it is that I do here, hitting the like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other Kansas City Chiefs fans. If you find yourself here by chance but not design, the Kansas City Chiefs are the only thing I talk about on this channel, dropping multiple videos every single week, and I hope to have you back for the next one.